What's going on, y'all? It's Imani, your brother-in-law, here with my boy Conrad,
Conrad, your brother-in-law.
and would like to introduce y'all to the Brothers-in-Law podcast. It really feels like the first episode, even though it's really not. But it's the first one where it's just Conrad and I together, and we're just really excited to see what this journey can really come and grow to. Conrad, how you doing, bro?
I'm all right, man. I'm all right. I'm a little busy
Yeah,
right now. Nowadays, occupies a lot of space in my mind, but I'm doing well otherwise.
got you,
What
got
about
you.
you?
Same, man. Work is hard, bro.
Yeah,
As
tough right
as
now.
as much as I really want to grow this podcast. I know how hard it is to find the time to do so, given what we do.
Yeah,
It's always so much work to do, so much things,
unpredictable too.
man.
Unpredictable.
But yeah, so we're gonna get to it. Before we dive into the episode of the pod, we want to reintroduce what the Brothers-in-Law podcast is. So I've recently launched a PLLC called For the Family, which is the umbrella for which the podcast is under. The Brothers-in-Law
What's a
podcast.
PLLC? What's
Oh,
that? What's that?
a PLLC is essentially a limited liability company, but for a professional.
Mm.
So for those who practice under a certain license, instead of getting a regular LLC, they advise to get a PLLC if you eventually want to practice under that company.
Mm.
Thank you for that question.
Yeah.
But yeah, so part of a component of the company is a podcast, and what I've realized is that both Conrad and I have been doing what we do for about 6 years now,
Yeah.
and being a public defender for 6 years, we've just learned so much that we did not know, and we know that we have a lot more knowledge of the law that your average folk may not know, may not understand. So I thought we would be remiss to not create a platform or not give back and break down our rights and our powers, so people are not walking throughout their lives without the power they need to know the power they need to interact with society and things like that.
Got to stop the gatekeeping.
You know what I'm saying?
Got to stop the gatekeeping.
So yeah, the idea is just to take the legal information and make it digestible, make it accessible. That way, instead of the law being used, against you, you can use it to protect yourself. So that's the spirit behind the podcast. So we hope that today we can empower you and arm you with some knowledge you did not have before today. And each episode, we hope to address a new concept or a new topic, or just talk about what life is like as a public defender for the two of us. Um, so today we are going to talk about what's called orders of protection. Also, it's not clear. Conrad and I are both public defenders. We are criminal defense public defenders. So we work and defend people accused of committing crimes. We work in the Bronx.
Mm-hmm.
So most of what we talk about is going to be within the context of criminal law, criminal defense, and your rights as it pertains to being arrested in criminal law. So with that being said, today's episode we're focusing on what is called orders of protection, which some of you may be familiar with already, unfortunately or fortunately. Some of you may not know what that is, how it works, what the limits of it are. Uh, and hopefully today you have a little bit more understanding of what an order of protection is, how it works, and just the nature of it all. So, Conrad, can you try to explain what an order of protection is and how it manifests itself in the criminal world?
Yeah. Another disclaimer first is a lot of what we know is based in New York law. So
Mm,
a lot of what we talk about will be New York law, but a lot of these concepts are, they apply generally around the country. So,
got you.
That's with that disclaimer out the way.
Right. So for those of you in Texas, or those of you in Florida who know us, don't think that everything that we say here applies to where you at.
Right.
But there may be some similarities in your states and your jurisdictions.
Right. So orders of protection generally are just that. It's an order or a mandate from a judge saying, don't do this certain thing to this person, or don't act in a way that I'm telling you not to act when it regards this person or this thing or this entity.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we see it most of the time in cases where there's harm or violence done to another individual, right? A judge will issue an order of protection saying, stay away from the home, school, place of business or work of this person.
Could you give me an example of how an order of protection will come up?
Yeah. What do you mean by come up?
Like, what's a scenario to where someone will get an order of protection?
Right. So the one that people are most familiar with is the scenario where there's domestic violence, right? Where, a domestic partner attacks their domestic partner or is alleged to have attacked their domestic partner. When they go to court, they'll see a judge, and normally the judge will make a determination about whether there needs to be something in place to protect the person who was harmed, right? And so that's what the order of protection is. It's the judge saying, hey, there's enough evidence, at least at this stage, or there are enough allegations at this stage that you did something to harm this other person. I think we need to do something to protect that other person, and that something is telling you to stay away from them or to
So
not do certain things to them.
let's give a concrete example. So we said we got Jack and Jill in a relationship.
They went up the hill.
Jill slaps Jack,
Uh-huh.
punches him, scratches him to get into a little scuffle.
Yeah.
Jack calls the police and say, hey, my girlfriend is assaulting me. I need help. The police come. They see scratches on Jack's face. Jack tells the police, she slapped me. She hit me up. She's been beating me up. The police arrest Jill. Jill gets arrested. She goes to the precinct. She gets booked. She goes see the court. Then what happens?
So she goes to court. She sees the judge for the first time for what is called her arraignment. And what an arraignment is, it's the first time the judge or somebody tells you what you're charged with formally. You plead not guilty from there, and then the judge talks about, whether you're going to be released on your own or whether bail is going to be set, and then what are your conditions of release, right? And so that's where the order of protection comes in. It would be one of your conditions of release, most likely.
All right. So let's say she's seen the judge. She hears her charges, and then the district attorney's office, who's the one who's determining, to charge somebody, what to charge them with, the DA's office says, Judge, we're asking that there be a full order of protection. What does that mean? And what are Jill's options, or what is the reality of that?
So what it means is the prosecution's asking the judge to issue that order, to tell the other person to not do something with respect to the person that's been harmed. In this case, it's Jack. So the prosecution's asking the judge to tell Jack, or to tell Jill not to do something to Jack or to stay away from Jack, right? And so here are what are Jill's options at that point, right? She depends on how much money Jill makes. If she does not make a certain amount of money at a certain threshold, she probably received a public defender by this point, right? So at that point, her lawyer would speak for her and try to argue against the order of protection being put in place, right? The defense attorney is telling the judge, hey, I know this is what the prosecution is saying, and I know that this is what Jack said happened to Jill, but judge, consider all these other things that are important for you to consider before issuing an order of protection. Like, Jill lives with Jack, right? And this is the only place she has to live. Jill doesn't have family in that area where she could go stay with. She doesn't have friends where she can go stay with. Or she has a job that's very demanding and needs to be able to have a stable place in order to, make sure she's making it to work on time.
Right.
Or Jack and Jill have a kid together, and Jill needs to be able to care for the kid and be able to pick the kid up whenever she wants. So the defense attorney is saying these things to the judge in order to get the judge to think about these things before they make that final decision about order protection.
Let's say you are Jill's lawyer and you just made all those arguments to the judge, and the judge goes, I'm still going to issue for order of protection. We can revisit this later. So what is the effect of there being a full order of protection saying that Jill has to stay away from Jack? What does that actually mean, and how does that manifest? What does that look like?
Right. And so the full order of protection that Imani's asking about tells Jill to stay away from Jack's home, Jack's place of business. If she sees Jack in the streets, stay away from him. Don't talk to Jack.
Mm-hmm.
Don't try to have somebody else talk to Jack on your behalf. Don't communicate with him at all. Stay away from him. Don't see him. Right. And so obviously a full order protection in that scenario is damning for Jill, right?
Right.
That's her partner. Jack's her partner.
Right.
She probably lives with Jack. She probably splits bills with Jack. She needs to communicate with him for other things. And so what the full order protection does there is kind of disrupts her entire life and tells her, I don't give a fuck about what your relationship is with this guy.
Mm-hmm.
You can't talk to him or see him or have anyone talk to him.
And if a judge issues that order, how long is it in place? Like, how long does she got to wait until she can see if she can get back home?
Yeah, generally the order of protection's in place throughout the entire life of the case. Right now, there are court dates in between between the beginning and the end of a case where perhaps her attorney can petition the judge again to change or ask the judge again to change the terms of the order of protection. But generally, the order of protection is going to be in place while the case is open.
So it could be anywhere from a month to a year.
Yeah.
However long it takes for the case to resolve.
However long it takes. Luckily, in New York, recently, there was a court decision called Crawford that came down that kind of asked courts to reconsider orders of protection that kind of have to do with people's substantial property interests and liberty rights, right? So like in the cases where somebody does live at home with the other person or does have a child with the other person or there's some other important property that the other person has some sort of control over, you get to have what is called a hearing, which is just it's a court proceeding that is kind of like a trial, but less high stakes and less evidence and less things are coming out.
Yeah.
Less procedures are in place at the hearing. And so at the Crawford hearing is what it's called. That's what the case was called. What happens is your defense attorney gets another chance to argue to the judge why the order of protection shouldn't exist the way it exists at that moment, right? And judges are supposed to receive evidence at that stage. And what receiving evidence means is the judge is supposed to hear things. The judge is supposed to get something from the DA, whether it's documents or a person testifying, something from the DA that shows the judge why the order of protection has to be in place the way it is right now, right? And the defense attorney's job is to maybe have some evidence or documentation themselves that shows that this person has this very important interest in what was taken away from them,
right?
And or try to show the judge that things are not exactly what they seem, and like the allegations may not be as serious as the prosecution's making it out to be,
right?
So that the judge again can consider all of these things and make a more informed decision,
right,
about this thing that could, dramatically change Jill's life for the time being.
Okay, so let's say, Jill, she had her Crawford hearing. The judge still denies to change the order of protection, so she still cannot have any contact with Jack. And let's say Jill turns to you, her lawyer, and is like, "Yo, he also beats me. He also does all these things to me. What can I do to get an order of protection in favor of me? I should be the one that's getting protected, not Jack. So can you help me get an order of protection that protects me?"
Yeah, we went into the scenario a lot, and that scenario is tough, right? I know lawyers are annoying because they always, a lot of times they say it depends, right? That's what their answer is a lot of the time. It depends. And I think this is a it depends kind of moment, right? Like Jill is telling me that Jack has beat her in the past. And like that obviously, like law aside, makes me feel terrible for my client, right? Like she might be the actual person who is being harmed in this scenario,
right?
And then is now being doubly harmed by this order of protection, right?
Right.
And so my instinct is to want to help her, right? Like my instinct is to want to do something for my client,
right?
Right? But I need to think in the moment whether it's right strategically or a good strategic thing for us to do to bring this to light at this stage, right? And then my job as Jill's attorney is to kind of lay my concerns out for her at the time,
Right.
about bringing these things up and tell her the pros and cons of bringing these things up.
Right.
Right. And so, it depends on what's going on in the case and what's going on in Jill and Jack's life. Right.
Right.
Maybe at the Crawford hearing, or actually you said we're past this stage, right? Like maybe it's advantageous at this point in time to call the DA and talk to the DA about what's been going on with Jill, right? Maybe it's not, right? Like maybe I need to talk to Jill a little bit more to get more facts about what happened, to corroborate what she says before I talk to the DA, right? A lot of that depends on what prosecutor I'm working against and what they're like, right? I need to consider what the judge is like. Like, is the judge going to care if I bring up these things? Or if I bring up these things, or is this judge now going to sink their claws into the case and be looking at everything with a more keen eye and kind of trying to get the prosecutor to do more in the case instead of letting it go away? Like, I need to consider these things, right? That's one consideration, just the court considerations.
Right.
The other consideration is like, Jill said she wants an order of protection, right? She can't get that just by me talking to the judge or the DA, right? What she needs to do is have a case opened up against Jack.
You see, and that's what I was also going to go to.
Yeah.
I guess part of why I asked the question is to highlight the fact that oftentimes there's little we can do to almost to nothing to guarantee that somebody gets an order of protection in their favor.
Right.
I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there's only two ways to get an order of protection that protects you. And that's to have somebody get arrested, get charged, and a judge to issue one, or for you to go to family court and have a judge issue one.
Right.
Either way, a judge has to issue one, and there are layers that have to happen in order for that to happen. And what sucks is like a lot of it depends on other players' discretion. So like if you say, hey, I want him to get arrested, well, the police can decide not to arrest him. So you can file a complaint. You can say, hey, this is what happened to me. I want him to be arrested. I want to press charges. And then the police then decide, okay, is there enough here actually for me to go forward with the arrest, or is there not?
Right.
If there isn't, and he doesn't get arrested, there's no way to get a criminal court involved to give you order protection. If they do decide to arrest him, then the next level is the DA. The DA has to decide, okay, is there enough to even have a charge here?
Right.
And then if it gets past the police and the DA and gets to a judge, then the judge has to decide, is there enough to even ask for an order of protection here? So I say all that to say sometimes it's near impossible to just go into court or to just get an order of protection and protection of you if someone has not been arrested, or if a family court judge doesn't decide to do so. So like the other avenue is, let's say you don't want to go through the process of getting somebody arrested and you just want to get an order of protection in your favor. You can go to a family court judge. You can go, or here in New York, you can go to your local family court and you can petition for an order of protection. And what the way it looks like is you just go before a judge and you say, this is what's happening to me. This is the proof I have of what's happening to me. And then the judge decides, okay, I would issue one, or I won't, or I would issue some modification of one. But my point is, sometimes there's just no way to guarantee that someone who wants an order of protection, or even someone who may need an order of protection, can get one. And that us as defense lawyers are very limited in our power to even make anything like that happen.
And sometimes it's not a good idea.
And sometimes not a good idea.
Because like you could end up pissing Jack off more, to where the point Jack just makes completely false allegations against Jill just because he's pissed that she went and tried to get an order of protection, or that she did try to get an order of protection, right? Which could mess up Jill's underlying case, right? Or maybe like Jack and Jill have a kid and Jill does get this other order of protection, right? And now both parents are taken away from their kid. And where's the kid gonna go? Right. Or like now ACS is getting involved, right? Taking the kid away from Jill. ACS is Child Protective Services in New York, right? Like there's so many other considerations too, right? Which, makes it unfortunate when we're trying to advise our clients about these orders of protection.
I think also something that's important is I think your average person doesn't understand that there's a variety of different ways an order of protection can be in place. Some people think it's either a full, meaning I can't have any contact with this person, or no order of protection at all.
Right.
But the reality is that there are different modifications of order protections that we like to argue, and I firmly believe still protect somebody, but doesn't have the bars that are there for a full order protection.
Right.
And so I'll try to break this down and fill in any
Yeah.
blanks that I'm
Go
missing.
ahead. Yeah.
So I believe I would say there are three kinds of orders of protection with like a semi fourth. So you have your full order of protection, and that's a judge saying you must stay away from this person. You can't have any contact with them. You can't go to where they live, where they work, where they go to school. You can't have any third party contact them. You can't text them. You can't call them. You can't hit them up on social media. Here's the hard part about it: you can't even respond. That person can call you. That person can text you. The moment you answer that phone,
You're
you are in violation of order of protection. You can be rearrested and have new charges called criminal contempt for violating a court order by answering a phone call. It's all it takes is to answer a phone call. So that's a full order of protection, meaning you cannot have any contact whatsoever with that protected person. Then I think the tier under that would be an order of protection subject to incidental contact. So that context would be like, let's say me and Conrad are roommates and we've been living together for a year. We get into a fight, we both get arrested, and the DA is like, they don't need to have contact with each other because it's toxic and they need to be, away from each other. A judge can issue in full order protection to both of us saying that we can't have any contact with each other, but it can be subject to incidental contact. What that would mean is like if I see him, you know, in the bathroom, I mind my business. If I see him in the hallway, I mind my business. If I see him walking into our apartment, we just don't have any contact. If he goes on the elevator first, I wait. If he goes up the stairs, I wait. To where that allows us to still coexist. But we are instructed to not have any contact with each other, but we can have incidental contact so long as we are, not escalating the situation. And then I think the most free range order protection is a limited order protection. So it's still an order protection that gives you guidelines and parameters for how you can maneuver with somebody, but it allows you to still live. So another example, let's say it's me and Conrad again, we get into a fight and the judge issues a limited order protection, then we are still allowed to live together. We can even have a conversation. We can hang out. We can go hoop. We can work out. We can go to work. We can have conversations. We can do all these things. We just can't commit any crimes against each other. Now it sounds kind of weird because you already are supposed to not commit crimes against each other. But here, if you do, you'll be having an additional charge. So you can be charged with whatever crime that we commit against each other, and now contempt of court for violating a court order.
Well, Imani, I could probably, well, it depends on who has the order of protection, right? If I have the order of protection, I can commit a crime against you, right? But you can't commit a crime against me, right?
Right.
Like, it
But
depends
if
on who
you commit a crime, you still can get arrested for that crime
yeah, if you call the police.
if
Right?
I call the police.
Right. I guess the point I'm just trying to make is like the person who has the order of protection protecting themselves,
Yeah.
they don't have any restrictions. They could do whatever the hell they
Correct.
want. Like you said, I could call you if I
Right,
want to.
right.
Like, knowing that you're gonna pick up the phone. When
Right.
you pick up the phone, I gotta be like, aha, I got you.
Right.
You know?
And that's what I think what we see the most. I think the kinds of orders of protection that Conrad and I deal with the most is, like you said earlier, domestic violence situations. And I use the circumstance of Jill being our client, but it's mostly Jack who's our client. So it's mostly a guy who is being accused of some kind of domestic violence. And then what happens is the women and the guy are trying to work things out. But anytime she calls him, anytime she texts him, any communication that she has with him, if he responds in any way, even if it's "I love you," even if it's "How are our kids doing," even if it's "Hey, can I send you some money for the rent?" That's a violation. And if you have a toxic relationship to where she's cool Monday, but Tuesday she upset with you, all she has to do is call the police and show them a proof that you responded or called her. You can be arrested and you can be charged, and it's not much to defend a case like that.
And fellas, this is a little far afield from orders of protection, but please don't do the call or you call and say, I love you, or I want to give you money, right? Or can we just end this or drop this? Don't do that, because that is a separate crime called witness intimidation, right? Like, please don't. I know it seems like morally okay to do, but legally could get you in a lot of trouble, right? Could get you in a lot of trouble.
And I understand how it's hard. Like, I've been dating somebody for 2 years. You mean to tell me I can't have any communication with them? I understand, like, okay, judge says stay away, fine.
Right.
But she called me, I can't answer.
Right. Can't answer.
If she texts me, I can't respond.
No. If she calls you and says, yo, somebody is attacking me right now, come help, you can't even go help.
Right.
because there's an order of protection in place telling you to stay away.
All right, so let's try to have a conversation about like whether how we feel about orders of protection, and let's try to be fair in the conversation.
Okay.
So
Try.
we are defense lawyers, so we obviously often deal with our clients not having access to their home or to their kids because of an order of protection. So we often very are against orders of protection or feel kinds of way about them happening. But I do understand the argument for orders of protection. And it's usually a DA saying that this person has been injured, this person is in a, harmful circumstance, and to protect this victim, there needs to be something in place that protects this victim.
Mhm.
This person just got beat up. This person just got A, B, and C, strangled, choked. So long as this case is open, we need to make sure there's something in place to protect this person. So I understand the perspective of the DA being like, yeah, I think there should be a full order of protection. Your client should not be able to have any contact with that woman. I don't care if they live together. He should never have committed this crime. He should never have put his hands on her. That's his problem. Do you think there's credit to that perspective? Do you understand that perspective? What's your issue with it?
Yeah, I understand the perspective of wanting to do something to protect the harmed person, right? The survivor of the violence that was perpetrated. The question is, what does that something need to look like, right? Does it have to be a full order from a judge saying you can't have any communication with this person, or you can't live with this person, or go to their work, or anything of that nature, right? Does it have to be something that is court mandated at all? Does it have to be something where the court's involved at all, or that has the backing of further charges if you violate? I don't think so, right? I think, we have a tendency to think about things in a very carceral mindset, meaning like anything that we need to see put in place to stop a certain harm from happening, it has to be backed by the criminal legal system, criminal punishment system, or backed by police,
right?
The threat of police intervening, right?
Right.
I don't think it has to be that way, right? I think a judge could, I don't know, perhaps put an intermediary in place, right? Somebody who lives in the community and checks in on the house from time to time and is making sure that like there's no interpersonal violence happening, right? Or like depending on how intense the violence was, like maybe having more intense supervision of what's going on in the household, right? Somebody like that might need to be there during like most time frames, like making sure that people aren't like that the aggressor is not attacking the person that's a survivor again, right? I just feel like we could be more creative and imaginative about what we can do to protect survivors, right? And like, I don't think it has to be such a patriarchal, I know what's good for the survivor, I know what's best to protect them, right? Like, so I'm going to say this is what we're going to do, and it's the end all be all.
That's fair. What if it's the person who's saying I want the order of protection? I know you're saying we shouldn't make the decision for them. What if the person's like, I'm scared. I don't want to live with them.
I think that like that factor should hold a lot of weight, right? I think like what that person is saying, right, and what the fear that person is showing should hold a lot of weight. But again, I don't know if it should be the end all be all, right? Because like in addressing a harm that's done to another person, do we ourselves want to also commit another harm to the other person? Does that make it right? Like what's going on in the scenario? Does that mean we're doing the right thing to I guess kind of address what's going on with these parties? I don't think so, right? But I think that person's word should hold a lot of weight. I just don't think it should be at the end all be all. I think like that is the reason why a judge is a judge, right? Like they're there to make those tough calls and those decisions. And I think judges need to consider the entire picture of what's going on, and not just this side or just this side. Right. So,
I think that brings up an interesting just idea about like the harmed person having a say in what happens to them. Because it's funny, because I know we experience this all the time. If we have a client who got arrested for domestic violence and the woman is saying, I want nothing to do with them, I don't want any contact with them, in those circumstances, the DA is going to be like, you know what, for order protection, no contact whatsoever.
Right.
But on the flip side, if we have a circumstance where like the woman is saying, you know what, I'm over it. I love him. I want to get back together with them. You know, I'm fine with them coming home. In those circumstances, the DA disregards what the victim wants, and oftentimes still is like, you know what, I'm still going to disregard what they want and ask for order protection.
Mm-hmm.
So like sometimes the victim or the harmed person has a say in what happens. Other times what they want is ignored, and that's where the, you know, our views of how, you know, patriarchal that system is
Mm-hmm.
comes into play,
Mm-hmm.
and it just makes it so frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
But then I also understand the perspective as to why sometimes a DA or a judge would be like, I know they don't want the order of protection, but this person is stuck in a cycle of domestic violence. We see this all the time. And we need to do what we can to help break that cycle. So even if they're saying I want him to come home, we are viewing that as someone who is stuck in a cycle of domestic violence. So that person ends up having no control what happens to them.
All right. But Imani, does the judge know that for sure? Does the DA know that for sure?
No, none of them do. None of them do.
Is that them just projecting onto these parties what they think the world is like?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of it is fear. I can see a judge being afraid of making the decision, you know what, I'm going to allow this person to come back home.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2 days later, the person ends up
Right.
beat up again or worse. And I think judges are often guided by that rather than guided by like true considerations of whether or not it's necessary to have the order protection.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that's why like it's important for everybody to really like think about what we're doing and the purpose of why we're doing something, right? If the judge really wants to interrupt that violence, why not have an expert look into what's going on in the home, talk to both parties, see if it really is a cycle of violence going on, before making a final decision about like whether they're going to like go the full route of a full order of protection, right? Like, I just think again, our mindset is just immediately punish, or immediately like full backing and threat of the criminal punishment system and police. And like, you know, I want to counsel against that knee-jerk reaction.
I got you. All right, so I think the last thing I wanted to do, and I'll go first and I'll let you think about this. I want you to think of like one piece of advice regarding orders of protection you want to leave people with. Or game, because this is, you know, not free legal advice. This is only free game. Okay. So I'll go first. I think if I can give one piece of game to get from this conversation, is to understand if you call the police on somebody, there are so many consequences that you may not be aware that are going to happen because you calling the police, and one of those consequences can be an order of protection. And I know sometimes you may call the police because you're just frustrated, you're upset, you need some kind of intervention in the moment. But the reality is getting the police involved in most situations just can escalate and go beyond what you are asking to be done in your situation. So whether it's a friend, whether it's a family member, I see this all the time with family members, whether it be siblings, it can be a mother and a daughter, it can be a father and a son, where there is a family dispute, and what they do is they call the police to mitigate the harm. And then what happens is the police get involved, then the DA gets involved, then the judge gets involved, and the result of you making that phone call to the police now has resulted in maybe you being homeless because the judge said you can't go home. Maybe your son being homeless because the judge said your son can't go home. Maybe your daughter being homeless because the judge said you can't go home. You not being able to co-parent because the judge says you can't. The mother of your child can't be in your house. So now, how are you going to coordinate childcare duties? So like my one piece of game would be, before you call the police, understand that one of the likely consequences of getting the police involved is having a judge come in and issue an order of protection, that the result would be somebody can't have contact with somebody, and that might not be what you wanted. You may just have wanted somebody to calm down in the moment. You just may wanted to sleep things off. You may not have wanted someone to be, number one, facing criminal charges, and number two, not have access to their home, to their children, to their liberty, to their freedom. So that'd be the one thing I want to advocate for in this conversation.
Yeah. And I guess I would take the piece like after an order of protection is put in place. Like, and my advice is don't be stupid, right? And I know I know that seems self-explanatory, but it's not, because people think that they can outsmart the system, right?
Mhm.
People think they can outsmart the judge and the DA and the police, and you can't. You
Mhm.
can't, right? In New York, the police do something called welfare checks or safety checks, right?
Mhm.
So sometimes they'll randomly knock on the home door and try to see. They do that just to see if the party that is supposed to stay away is there at the home,
Mhm.
right? I have a lot of clients who get caught up that way, right?
Mhm.
And it's a new case, right? And
Mhm.
it's an easy case for the prosecutor because the only witness is a police officer, and that's all they need,
Right.
right? I've had clients create fake Facebook pages that have their initials on it and try to talk to the harmed party through Facebook that way. And it's like, I get a screenshot from the prosecutor with
Right.
my client's initials on it
Right.
and a picture, and it shows my client talking to the person.
Right.
What am I gonna do? Like, my only argument there is like, well, you can't see his name. Like,
Right.
how do you prove it's him?
Right.
Right? Like, but
Who else
look
is
how
it?
stupid that sounds.
Right.
See how stupid that sounds,
Right.
right? Like,
Right.
you're not, like, you can't really outsmart the system like that. So, like, just don't be stupid.
You know, we should have a segment where we call "Don't Be Stupid,"
Don't be
where we just
stupid.
like are highlighting some of the stupid things that our clients have done. And in that same regard, I have seen a circumstance, and I know you have too, where in to try to avoid violating order of protection, somebody who, let's say they're at Rikers Island. When you're at Rikers Island, you have a PIN number that's associated with you.
Mhm.
So what that means is anytime you make a phone call, you have to dial in your PIN number so that way Rikers can keep track of who's making what phone calls. We've seen circumstances where someone has tried to like use someone else's PIN number to make a phone call to avoid violating an order of protection. And again, that's just stupid because your voice is still on the phone call. Every Rikers Island phone call is all recorded,
That's what I was about to say.
and there's
Like,
no way to really try to finesse the
that's
system.
one of the ones that give me the most, man.
Right.
What do you hear the moment the person answers the phone? This phone call is recorded.
Yes.
And people go ahead anyway, bro. That one pisses me off so much. Like, what are you
Right.
doing, man?
Right. Don't be stupid. Leave the finessing to defense lawyers.
Yes.
Okay. Let
Let
us
us
finesse
finesse.
for you. Don't try to finesse yourself because all you're doing is making it harder for us. That's all you're doing. But yeah, I think we've come to the end of this episode. The hope is that you know a little bit more about orders of protection. You have a little more language to it whenever you're having conversations, and you know, God forbid you're ever in a situation where you're dealing with one, you may have more of an understanding of what it really means and the nature of orders of protection.
Yeah.
But again, y'all, this is the Brothers-in-Law podcast. It really feels like episode number 1, where we don't give free legal advice, just free game. We have many more topics and things we'd like to discuss with y'all in future episodes. So please stay tuned. And yeah, we appreciate y'all for checking in. Also, one last thing, I just want to say thank you to all the love and support so far. We've put out one episode-ish, and a lot of our friends and family have really been
We appreciate you.
commenting and sharing it. So we really appreciate y'all. Please forward the information. We really think that the more this gets out there, the more people can really be empowered by this stuff. The only thing that we want out of this is for people to understand their rights and their power.
Yeah, and please have these conversations in your community with your family members too.
Right.
It doesn't have to be the end of the conversation for you.
Facts. Well, with that being said, enjoy the rest of your evening, your day, your morning, whatever time you listen to this. We appreciate y'all.